Good morning. We're going to continue with chapter 4 from our book, The Singing Stone. The forest was a cathedral of tall pine. Excuse me, Lord. The forest was a cathedral of tall pine, deep-rooted oak, dark alder. Okay, it's first thing in the morning. I'm trying not to miss the sunrise. Here we go. I mean, I've just been sitting here. I haven't missed anything, but I'm trying to catch it with our story here. The forest was a cathedral of tall pine, deep-rooted oak, dark alder, and mountain ash. The treetops resounded with the chatter of birds. Creatures scampered and rustled in the undergrowth. Oh, Lord. A diaphanous light suffused the air, the green dimness of the leaves blending with the earthly brown of the forest floor. It was a world of great and small. Pillars of wood rose to the sky with towering majesty, while at their feet grew miniature flowers and delicate fern, blue-eyed grass and peeping mushrooms. And where the dark branches bent trembling down, cobwebs wove their gossamer threads, beaded with the jeweled drops of dew. Kay and Ahami had been walking since dawn. The forest became increasingly dense as they left the high slopes and moved downward into the valley. They were traveling westward in search of the twin peaks of Ton Dub, where Fintan Tuan lived or dwelled. With quiet concern, Kay kept a watchful eye on the younger girl. In the light of day, Ahami seemed even slighter and more frail. Her face was unnaturally white and pinched from lack of sleep and nourishment. They had managed to fashion rough coverings for her feet by tearing up Kay's poncho, but her ragged clothes were poor protection from the cool, moist air. Though Kay divided the tea and sandwiches remaining in her knapsack, it wasn't enough for a long day's tramp. She knew that proper food and clothing would have to be found before the girl became seriously ill. Ahimi, however, was more concerned with the threat of wolves and wild boars. She told Kay of fearful nights spent shivering in the high shelter of the trees. "Don't worry about it," Kay said with more assurance than she felt. "They wouldn't attack us in broad daylight." But she stepped up their pace from that point on. They forded the Glancraig River at a shallow bend and rested on its banks before setting out again. They could see the peaks of Ton Dub in the distance, and though they were footsore and hungry, they were cheered by the sight of their destination. They left the forest behind them and climbed upwards over brushland of gorse and bracken to stony ground and steep slopes of rock. They talked very little on that long hike. Kay had yet to get used to the novelty of a constant companion, and Ahami needed what energy she had to keep herself moving. But they stayed together at all times and helped each other over the roughest parts, both suffering without complaint the sharp pangs of hunger and the ache of tired limbs. At last, they were scaling the high ground of the twin mountains of Ton Dub. moving cautiously through the craggy gap that lay between. "There it is!" Kay cried, her voice breaking with strain. Where the spires of Ton Dub split like an open mouth, they could see a square shape, jutting upwards to the sky. It clung against the precipice like a limpet to a rock, jagged stones haphazardly piled upon each other to form a ruinous but unmistakable tower. Had they not been searching for it, they could easily have overlooked it as part of the mountain. A narrow ledge ran up the cliffside toward the tower. Ahami let out a moan when she saw the ledge. "I am afraid of such heights. I cannot go further." She was trembling, and tears began to trickle down her face. "We have to," Kay insisted, too sore and exhausted to hide her impatience. "We can't go back now. Hold my hand and don't look down." They crept carefully along the ledge, their eyes averted from the sheer drop below. Kay went first, clasping Ahami's hand, and whenever the girl faltered, pressing her face against the rock in a spasm of terror, Kay would grip her, all the harder to urge her on again. As they neared the tower, they discovered with relief that the path steadily widened till they were treading on solid ground once more. Excuse me, Lord. Faint with exhaustion, Ahami leaned on the older girl. She was trailing blood behind her, as the sharp stone had pierced the thin coverings on her feet. "I am sorry for my cowardice," she whispered, as Kay grasped her around the waist and led her forward. "I am sorry for being so mean," Kay said gently. "Look at your poor feet. You kept going anyway. You are no coward." The tower rose before them, less forbidding at closer range and overgrown with brambles of raspberry and twining ivy. Though it leaned precariously over a deep chasm on one side, the big oaken door was facing directly towards them, and in front of the door was an old man, stooped and moving slowly, pulling at the wild herbs and plants that grew at his feet. The old man straightened up with a long groan and rubbed his back. He wore a rough, dun-colored tunic and a wide straw hat. A small sack hung over his shoulders, bulging with the berries and greens he had gathered. His face was brown and wrinkled, his eyes cloudy with poor sight. But as soon as he saw the state of the two girls, Kay half carrying, half dragging Ahami, he hurried to meet them. "Are you Fintan Tuan, sir?" Kay asked politely, though her voice was hoarse. Let's fix that. There we go. Look, you can have the back window, my friend. My favorite little friend. I think that the fall season might have brought in some allergies on the wind and the water. My goodness, I'm itchy scratchy in my eyeballs. Whew. Alright, let's see, where to start that. "Are you Fintan Tuan, sir?" Kay asked politely, though her voice was hoarse. "That is one of my names, daughter," he replied. "Welcome to my home. There is rest here for the weary traveler." And he lifted Amy in his wiry arms and carried her into the tower. The inside of the tower was even stranger than the outside. And as soon as she stepped within, Kay sensed that something was wrong. She followed Fintan through a maze of corridors, which meandered endlessly like the secret passageways of the mind. Everything was dark and echoing with silence, and there was an overwhelming feeling of something lost. They entered a spacious hall, shaped like a courtyard, but obscured in shadow like the rest of the tower. The floor was strewn with smooth sand, and in the center was a marble fountain with statues of sea serpents coiling upwards. But no water splashed from the font, and the figures were dried and cracked. Kay was looking sadly at these when she noticed tapestries that covered the high walls, hanging heavily from ceiling to floor. In the dim light of the chamber, she could barely discern the outline of intricate pictures lost beneath a film of dust. Her feelings were confirmed. Twilight had settled over this tower, and it was but the remains of past grandeur and beauty fled. Kay did not have long to muse on the state of the hall. Kay did not have long to muse on the state of the hall as Fintan Tuan had carried Amy past the fountain and through an archway on the far side. She hurried to catch up with them and found herself in a big, homely kitchen. The walls were blackened with smoke from the huge hearth that burned a roaring fire. Cupboards and shelves, heaped one upon the other, were filled to overflowing with pots and dishes, jars of pickles and preserves, strong boxes and books. On the top shelf, Kay could see what appeared to be a menagerie of stuffed birds, but when one of them winked at her, she realized they were alive and perched comfortably in slumber. From the beams of the roof hung strings of onion and garlic, dried sage and wild peppermint, and the scent of these mingled with the delicious smell of a meaty stew. A great cauldron was bubbling over the fire. Kay felt her legs weaken as hunger raged through her. The old man had set Amy down in a chair by the hearth and was washing and bandaging her feet. He murmured gentle words that seemed to revive her, and when she sat up and stared around the kitchen, she looked much better. "Right as rain now, eh?" said Fintan with a dry chuckle. He turned to Kay, who was swaying on her feet. "Sit you down, daughter," he ordered her kindly, pulling another chair to the fire. "By the goddess, it must have been a long walk that brought you here." Kay slumped into the chair, too weak to talk or move, but the bright flames and the coziness of the kitchen made her feel warm and safe. Fintan puttered around them, opening drawers, cupboards, slicing bread, dishing out stew, all the time humming a cheery tune to himself. They didn't eat their meal at the table, but sat with their chairs drawn up to the hearth, cradling the deep, wooden bowls in their laps and dunking the thick gravy with hunks of bread. They ate without speaking, the girls too hungry to stop until they were full, having seconds and thirds and delighting the old man with their appetites. When they were finished, he gave them cups of hot cider and took out a long clay pipe for himself. They sat in happy company, the roaring fire before them, the dark kitchen at their backs, 2 young girls and the wise old man called Fintan Tuan. "I have been waiting for both of you," Fintan said, looking first at one and then the other. Ahame gasped, and Kay looked startled, but he continued, "And I see that I have not waited in vain. You have good hearts, and your faces show courage and fortitude. You will do well in the task ahead." "I think you're mistaken," Kay began. Then she stopped in confusion. A strange sensation was coming over her, the feeling that she knew Fintan somehow, and that all was occurring as it should. The old man gave her an understanding look. "I am not mistaken." His eyes seemed to bore into hers as if he could see not only her thoughts, but the trail of her life behind them. "You have traveled far to meet me from a place beyond the mountains." Kay nodded dumbly. Stop putting B's in words if you don't want me to say them already. Kay nodded dumbly. "And you have come to me for aid. I know. But it is the proper law of life that in order to help yourself, you must help others." He sat up in his chair, and the firelight gleamed in his eyes like twin columns of flame in a dark pool. "I am Fintan Tuan Mac Carroll, the White Ancient, he who was before recorded time, he who has spun the history of hosts upon his walls. You have seen my hall, the silent fountain, the darkened tapestries. The light has gone from my memory, and all that is left is faltering blindness." He leaned towards them, his voice low and urgent. "This darkness is not only mine, but that of the race whose history I thread now in this woven, world-forgotten place. Twilight is upon us, a time of peril and disorder. The Tuatha De Danann are approaching their doom." Ahame let out a cry, but Kay stared at the old man incredulously. "And there's something we can do about it?" she said. Fintan smiled with wisdom. "That is how it has always been, since the world began. It is the small and weak who must rise for the good of all. The great are too concerned with their own interests." Kay was silent as she considered his words, but it was something he said earlier that made up her mind. To help yourself, you must help others. She had already decided to look after Amy, but it seemed there were more duties to take on before she reached her own goal. "What do you want us to do?" she said at last. Fintan took a burning twig from the fire and lighted his pipe with long, slow puffs. "You must find the 4 ancient treasures of the Tuatha De Danann." And that is the end of chapter 4. Let me see how long chapter 5 is. Like I said, most of these are pretty little. Oh yeah, it's only 3 or 4 pages. Let's add some more. Beautiful. We got the birds down there. All right, I'm going to continue with chapter 5. Thank you for being with me. I appreciate you. That looks correct. Chapter 5. Evening drew on. The hearth fire glowed in a labyrinth of ash-red caves. Wind whistled round the corners of the tower. The 2 girls sat, eyes wide and enwrapped, as the old man told them a story of the golden age of the Tuatha De Danann. 'Twas in the early days of the world, when the tribe of Danu lived in the Hyperborean lands, far beyond the winds of time. 4 cities they raised up by art and magic. Bright Gorias of the fiery mountains, fair Findias of the cold, white snow, sea-shining Murias, and Phalias, the city of stone. They shone like jewels on the crown of the earth, and all within was splendid and beautiful, harmonious and grand. And in these cities 4 treasures were made to be a link of power that would exalt the Danann race. In the fires of Gorias they forged the sword, slender as a hazel wand, but whistling with 2-edged vigor. It had a blade of diamond and an ivory hilt. In the icy air of Findias they shaped the spear, an upright weapon. It was finely pointed with diamond tip and shaft of ivory. In the warm waters of Murias was cast the cauldron, a round-bellied vessel, beautiful in form like the others. It had a rim of diamond and an ivory bowl. Fintan paused, and his voice took on a deeper timbre. In the finest of cities stood the finest of treasures. In Phalias was raised the Leafal, the stone of destiny that sings truth and fate into the world. All that is right, all that is to be, proceeds from its voice. "The singing stone?" cried Kay. "That's what I was looking for myself, but I found it already. It brought me here and then it disappeared again." Fintan nodded slowly. "Indeed, you found the stone, for it called out to you. But though it chose to carry you here, it does not sing in this land. Only when the 4 treasures are united will their true power shine forth. Then will my hall and memory be rekindled, and then each of you shall find what you seek." "This is spiraling on and on," Kay said, dazed. "Naturally, daughter," Fintan replied in a slightly admonishing tone. "The spiral is a symbol of life. Nothing runs in straight lines or completed circles. That is a false perception." "But what became of the cities?" Ahemi asked. "Why do my people no longer dwell in them?" And what happened to the treasures? Fintan sighed heavily before he answered her. The treasures were made of ivory, diamond, and stone. But while ivory is ever pure and stone unchanging, the beauty of diamond always secretes a flaw. Excuse me, Lord. He gazed into the fire, now cooling onto dove-gray ash. He gazed into the fire, now cooling into dove-gray ash. There was a flaw in the treasures, a flaw in the race of Danu. The link of power that should have exalted your race was not rightly forged. A darkness came over the cities of glory, and their end drew near. The Tuatha De Danann built a great fleet and set sail upon the far-flung seas till they came at last to this sweet isle. They called it Innisfail, Island of Destiny, in honor of the stone, and they burned their ships in the belief that they had found a new home. Excuse me. And the treasures, prompted Ahemi. Oh, they came too, Fintan said dryly. Though the linking of the four had failed, each treasure had power of its own, and they brought prosperity and grandeur to the Danans of Innisfail. But when the passing of each generation, the memory of the old days grew dimmer. 2 treasures were lost, 2 forgotten, and they are now scattered over the land. So how are we to find them? Kay asked. Though he had seemed to gain dignity in the telling of his tale, Fintan now lapsed back into the manner of a dottery old man. He poked the dead fire with a listless foot and fumbled over his pipe. That I can't tell you, he said finally, avoiding their eyes. You will have to search blindly. But this I do know. If you seek with your heart, with your instinct for the true, the treasures will find you. The girls looked at him with dismay. Both could feel the weariness of the long day dragging them down, and neither liked the idea of such a hopeless task. Fintan slapped his thigh with a sudden burst of joviality. Whatever. It's not as bad as all that. No worse than life itself. You never know what you are looking for until it finds you. And his laugh was infectious enough to make them smile. Then his face grew gentle. I will help you on your way. Do not fear. You are both young, and you'll feel fit and ready after a good night's sleep. He led them out of the kitchen and up a narrow stairway to a little bower. There were thick rugs on the floor and a big goose-feathered bed with woolen blankets. As soon as Fintan left, Ahemi jumped on the bed with a cry of delight. Far better than a prickly tree or the cold, cruel ground. As she quickly undressed, Kay laughed as the colored rags were tossed through the air. We'll have to ask him for some clothes for you. But Ahemi didn't reply. She was already under the covers and well on her way to sleep. Kay smiled at the girl. and aware of her own solitude, began to pace the room. Worrying about a Hamey had kept Kay's mind from her problems, but now in the silence of the tower, they crowded around her like dark angels. What was she doing on this adventure? Why had she been brought here? And by whom? Was there some secret design that she wasn't aware of? But whose? With sudden decision, she crept quietly out of the room and down the stairs to Fintan's kitchen. The hearth was cold, but a candle flickered on the wooden table, casting bright shadows through the darkened room. A black shape was hunched in one of the chairs, and Kay started with fright as two eyes suddenly opened to stare at her. "I couldn't sleep," she said, when she realized that it was Fintan. "I know," he replied. "I was waiting up for you." He pointed to the chair opposite him, and they sat facing each other with the flame of the candle between. "What do you see when you look at me?" Fintan asked her. Kay was surprised by the question and stumbled over her words. An old man?" she said, and added hastily, not meaning to be rude. Fintan's face crinkled with humor. "I can't accept truth over courtesy." Then he gave her a long look. "But what do you see when you think of me?" Kay felt her hands tremble as a rush of fear passed through her. Come, Fintan said firmly. "You have already used it once, by your own choice. It is now yours and under your power." Kay's eyes widened. Was her secret finally out? Was he talking about the pictures in her mind? But how could he know? She felt relief mingling with her fear and a rising excitement that left her breathless. It was now hers and under her power. She sat rigid in her chair and stared at the lined face across from her. Even as she had tried it that one time with the Hamey, Kay concentrated on the man before her. It seemed easier now. The images came in quick and clear succession. A great hawk beat its wings against the sky, a noble creature with eyes that burned like coals. Now a salmon, sleek and silvery, lying in a deep pool shaded by trees. Finally a man, tall like a king, with ancient wisdom shining in his features. The images faded, and without thinking, Kay bowed her head towards Fintan. It was an old man who sat before her, but she sensed also another presence, one of immense power and knowledge. "I am Tuwan," he said softly. "I am the hawk of time and the salmon of wisdom. I am the Ruad Rofessa, the lord of surpassing knowledge. "And what am I?" Kay asked him. Fintan smiled at her gently, but his eyes were veiled. "You are that which you are becoming. I cannot name it because you have not yet become it." He shook his head apologetically. "That's the trouble with time. I don't live within it, and I know you in the future as well as the past and the now. I can't answer your question, as it doesn't fit here, but you will know soon enough, and then we shall talk again. I promise. Kay understood that their conversation was over, and she could see Fintan's eyes closing heavily with sleep. As she stood up from the table, he added one last comment. You have accepted the power of your mind. It is a rare gift, and it can go further. Do not be afraid to use it. Thank you, Kay murmured. But Fintan's head was already nodding on his chest, and his breath came in slow whistles, like the wind. The next morning, Kay and Ahemi found themselves abandoned in the tower. Hall and corridor were silent and empty, and Fintan Tuan could not be found. Has he deserted us? Ahemi said anxiously. But when they came into the kitchen, they found a meal left out for them on the table. Thick slices of bread, dripping with honey, lay beside bowls of frothy milk. And beside the food was a bright heap of clothing. They're definitely for us, Kay said happily as she sorted through the pile. There were two of everything in a size to fit each girl. Trousers of supple brown hide, long-sleeved blouses of white wool, and leather sandals that laced up to the knee. But best of all were the broad cloaks of forest green, with deep cowls and woven cloth that would keep out rain and wind. Beautiful, Ahemi said. She twirled the mantle around her and fastened its golden brooch. I love the color green. Kay was inspecting the border that trimmed the cloak from hood to hem. Lost in thought, she traced the threaded symbol with her finger. A gold-stitched pattern of triple spirals. They are ideal clothes for traveling, Ahemi said, aware of Kay's silence. Yes, Kay said absently. He said he would help us on our way. She looked closely at Ahemi. There was a flush of color in the girl's thin face and a healthier light in her eyes. Fintan's hearty food and a long night's sleep had done her a lot of good. You look much better. Are you up for a long journey? Ahemi nodded eagerly, and Kay laughed. Well then, all we have to do is figure out where we're going. As they ate their breakfast, the two discussed the task that Fintan had given them. It's a quest, Kay said. Just like the stories in my books. Except we have 4 things to find instead of the usual 1. The 4 ancient treasures of my race, Ahemi said, and her voice echoed with awe. The sword, the spear, the cauldron, and the stone. But where to start looking for them, said Kay. I wish Fintan hadn't disappeared like that. The least he could have done was left us a hint or a sign or something. She remembered the stormy night in Bray and the message sent to her from the sea. A triple spiral, the same pattern as the one on her cloak. Does this mean anything to you? She asked Ahemi, suddenly pointing to the spirals. The symbol of Danu. Amy said, with a shrug as if stating the obvious. The eyes of the goddess. I don't see how that can help, Kay muttered with disappointment. They were quiet a while, and then Amy's face lit up. It is the sign! So clear and simple, I almost missed it. Her voice rose with excitement. The symbol of Danu is set in stone upon a sacred place, the Bronabone, the white mound on the banks of the river Bowen. They say it holds untold wealth and treasure. Kay slapped the table. We're on the road. That must be where we should go. But now, Amy looked anxious. It is a forbidden place where only the druids go. Death is its promise to any intruder. Kay caught Amy's fear and shivered, despite her cloak. With a deliberate effort, she shrugged off the warning. Let's not worry about that till we get there. Kay didn't express the thought which had suddenly struck her. They had no idea what kind of dangers they would face on this quest. And that is the end of chapter 5. Chapter 6 is pretty long. Like I said, it looks like we got 23 chapters, I think. 26. They're pretty little, though. Alright, so they're on the next quest. So here's the book that I've been reading. And here's her little characters that were. Thank you for being with me today, letting me read to you, watching the sunrise together. I appreciate you. We will continue.